The faces of Sweden. Faces of its people. The faces of its countryside. It is a part of Europe, yet here there is a fascination that is not equaled anywhere else. It is a mysterious, exciting land. Tracts of seemingly endless forest fringe her multitude of lakes. There are cities reminiscent of a northern Venice. Perhaps the easiest, certainly one of the most interesting ways to reach this country is by the Scandinavian car ferries. Although the voyage lasts a bare 24 hours, there are all the trimmings of a luxury cruise. As soon as they come aboard, passengers find themselves immersed in a Swedish lifestyle and environment.
Okej, kolla akten.
Like Britain, Sweden is traditionally first and foremost a seafaring nation. Gothenburg, her second biggest city, is the entry point for many travelers. Today, her busy waterway still sees a constant flow of freight and passenger shipping. Much of it will be local traffic, inward and outward bound for Britain and the North European ports. But some will come from more distant countries. Sweden is a big country, twice the size of Britain. To explore it in depth, it is a good idea to have a car. Many bring their own caravan. For the motorist, it is like entering a different, long-forgotten world. It is ideal motoring country. Well-surfaced modern roads stretch out to every region. They carry very little in the way of traffic. The roads run south to the shores of Kattegat, its crystal-clear, tideless waters, fringed by long sandy beaches, offer some of Sweden's finest bathing and swimming. Go further north up the west coast and the scenery changes dramatically. Within 100 miles, the friendly sands give way to granite cliffs and a magnificent, if less hospitable, coastline. Little fishing villages nestle protectively into every creek and inlet. The old wooden fishermen's houses painted, as everywhere in Sweden, with the traditional red falu paint. Even today, these little communities are still very much involved with and dependent on the sea. Every evening, the trawlers return to the harbour wall at Smögen. They hold an auction on the quayside to sell off their fresh catches of shrimps and fish. Then, the bargaining over, it's out to sea again for another night on the fishing grounds. As well as fishing ports, there are towns like Lyser on the west coast. Seaside places mainly devoted to the holiday market. The yacht marinas stretch right along the seafront. It is not quite true to say that every Swede has his own boat, but it very often seems like it. Here the smooth whaleback rocks slip gently into the ocean, forming long chains of fjords and islands, a perfect coast for the sailing enthusiast. Eastern Sweden is just as attractive to the keen yachtsman. Here the coast forms magnificent archipelagos. In fact, Sweden has more than 150,000 islands. There are over 4,000 miles of her deeply indented coastline, and in it there are countless little bays and sheltered anchorages. Throughout their long history, the Scandinavian peoples have always been seafarers. 3,000 years ago, their remote ancestors carved weird symbols on these granite slabs. They illustrate many odd, unfathomable scenes, strange creatures. But again and again, they depict these longboats, forerunners of the Viking ships. In this ship, the crew seemed to be praying to some long-forgotten unknown god. Another face of Sweden, Söderköping, on the Göta Canal. Today it is a sleepy little town that time has passed by, but once it was the capital of this region. In its church, medieval kings were crowned, and in the churchyard a Queen of Sweden lies buried. During the Middle Ages, merchant ships would sail up from the coast right to the town hall square. The waterway has long fallen into disuse. Weeds bloom where the keels of the old ships once lay. It used to be the custom in Sweden at the end of winter to move the farm animals up the mountains to richer pastures. Here they would stay in the summer farms, usually tended by the farmer's daughter. Traditional houses built from roughly trimmed logs. The first settlers in North America built their log cabins in just the same way. Today, summer farms are no longer economic, but the Swedes safeguard their heritage, still keep a few working. Girls still prepare farmhouse butter, bake the tunn bread, and spread it with delicious homemade cheese. This is a country which makes every effort to preserve its history, to keep the old crafts and skills. They still carve the wooden horses of Dalarna. The decoration follows a traditional pattern over 150 years old. Making jewellery from human hair. These rather macabre keepsakes were popular in Victorian England. On the shores of Lake Siljan, a local builder fashions a traditional church boat, used 2 centuries ago to take outlying villages across the lake for Sunday service. In a lakeside village, a husband and wife create their own unique designs in pottery. They are by no means unusual. Sweden finds room for artists and designers at all levels. Probably the best known of her many crafts is the art of glassmaking. Glassmaking first began in Sweden nearly 400 years ago. Now it has developed into a major industry. This is one of the many glass factories. Typical of Sweden, it is so well landscaped that there is hardly a hint of a factory chimney. We owe all this exquisite work to King Gustavus Vasa, who ruled in the 16th century. Appalled by the number of glasses broken at the Swedish court, he brought from Italy 2 craftsmen skilled in making the famous Florentine glass. Every year, for a few weeks, this old village comes alive. The blacksmith plies his trade. The village bakery is busy turning out a very tasty loaf of bread. And once again the old ladies card wool. The spinning wheel turns. They weave cloth on the looms and make lace by the old methods. This conscious turning back of the pages of history is typical of attitudes in Sweden to the past and to the need for conservation. It is a quite voluntary affair. Local people give their spare time to bring the old village back to life, to recreate the traditions and preserve the skills of the countryside.
Tack så mycket. Varsågod, smaka gärna.
There are even charcoal burners tending their kiln on the outskirts of the village. This couple are here to act as guides to the former home of a Swedish aristocrat. But they're not content just to do this. Instead, they reenact a story from its past. It is all part of Sweden's new thinking about her history and about tourism. So in the town of Uppsala, the 18th century botanist Linnaeus walks once more in the garden he laid out to illustrate his system of nature, as he called it. For Linnaeus was the father of modern botanical science. He can be seen once more in his country home. In place of the wallpaper he could not afford, he covered the walls with sketches taken from the notebooks of his pupils. Uppsala, seen from the ramparts of its 16th century castle. This town, where Linnaeus lived and worked, is one of Sweden's historic cities, a centre of both religion and learning. The cathedral, magnificent creation of the Middle Ages, where Linnaeus is buried. And the university building, where he worked. Within the city of Gothenburg are the Tivoli Gardens of Sweden, Liseberg, a charming combination of parkland, amusement rides and eating places. Easily the most popular attraction is the spectacular flume ride, which imitates the ones found at the lumber camps. Even at play, the forests and rivers are never too far from the Swedish mind. It is towards the north of the country that these forests and waterways lie, mile upon mile of them. Of the 96,000 lakes in Sweden, Dalsland has more of them than any other province. Many are connected by the Dalsland Canal, one of Sweden's most beautiful and interesting waterways. Built over 80 years ago to carry freight and to link Sweden and Norway, when these two kingdoms were under one crown, it runs for 160 miles across the country. Those who venture into these more northerly regions will find a challenging new world to explore. A world of complete freedom and unlimited space. Log huts like this are found along the trails. With the help of a fire, they give acceptable shelter and an opportunity to meet new friends.
Hello there, come and join us. Here, give me your rucksack.
Phew, thanks. I'm starving. We've been walking since dawn and we've had no breakfast.
Unpolluted water can be drunk from many of Sweden's lakes and fast-flowing rivers. And the surrounding forest lands form idyllic settings for those who prefer to sleep under a canvas roof. There is a real sense of comradeship found in these woods. Boys and girls of all nationalities get together, sharing food and shelter, as well as the chores. The ideal way to travel in this region is by canoe. They can penetrate deep into the country to places quite inaccessible by road. A wilderness, the last wilderness in Europe to explore at leisure. These dedicated campers can bathe whenever they see a lake that takes their fancy. Families with smaller children will find their swimming on the well-equipped camping sites, blended unobtrusively into the countryside. The traveller who prefers something more than al fresco living will find a whole variety of places where he can eat and stay. If he is lucky, he may stumble across old traditional eating places, their wooden walls elaborately painted, like the guest house at Tanum's Hede on the west coast. Restaurants and hotels can be expensive in Sweden, the country with one of the highest costs and one of the highest standards of living in Europe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
But the Swedes are determined to show their country to the world and have devised a scheme by which the traveller purchases in advance vouchers assuring him of bed and breakfast at a fixed price in a whole range of hotels. This is one, a deluxe international hotel in Gothenburg.
Enjoy your stay here.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, sir. May I help you?
Yes, the name's Marilyn.
The very same vouchers can be used throughout Sweden for different types of accommodation.
Lovely.
They are accepted in this ultra-modern motel, one of a chain extending all over the country.
Oh, and it was the medium for you, sir?
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
On the shores of Lake Siljan stands the Green Hotel. Many of its surrounding wooden buildings are over a century old and have been adapted as individual chalets for those who prefer a more secluded holiday. Even here at the main hotel, one of Sweden's oldest, the travel vouchers can be used to settle the bill for an overnight stay and breakfast.
Welcome to our hotel.
Thank you.
The spacious bedrooms are furnished in a traditional rather than modern style, but with all the comforts for immediate service and communication. After an aperitif on the terrace and a spectacular view over the lake, visitors can savor the smorgasbord table, Sweden's universal answer to the call of lunch. The elegant old-world Brunn Hotel at Söderköping was built when the town first rose to fame as a fashionable spa in the 18th century. Although it's still a well-known health resort, today many people come just to enjoy the calm, relaxing atmosphere. Hotels, especially the larger ones, are usually the center of nightlife. This particular nightclub boasts an English disc jockey. In August of the year 1628, King Gustav II's magnificent new warship sailed from Stockholm. A gust of wind caused her to heel over. Water poured in through her gun ports. The Vasa, flags flying, sails set, went down in 100 feet of water. Now, 350 years later, she has been raised from her muddy grave and housed in a special building. Inside, the humidity is maintained at a high level to prevent the wood cracking, and at frequent intervals, her entire hull is sprayed with a preservative. Item by item, the Vasa is being restored. One day, she will once more look as she did on that fateful August day in 1628. The capital of Sweden, Stockholm, is very much a sea city. Not surprising when you consider that she stands on a series of 14 islands. Often a water crossing can save the traveller miles of journeying overland. Sometimes called the Venice of the North, Stockholm gives the impression of a clean, elegantly spacious city. No other city in the world is to be found at such a latitude, for Stockholm is further north than Moscow, level with the southern tip of Greenland. In spite of this, its million or so inhabitants lead an enviable outdoor life. It was in the 13th century that Birger Jarl was to build the first Stockholm, a town of log cabins. Successive rulers have enhanced the city, building each in their own style, so that today, Stockholm, just like Sweden itself, offers very many different aspects. The Culture House, seat of Parliament, is a striking glass building, Swedish design at its very best. Not far from the Parliament building, there are unrivaled shopping facilities. These range from modern, multi-level covered precincts to the traditional stalls of the market square. The medieval Stortorget, or Great Market, in Gamla Stan. Here is a city within the city. The old town, with its narrow, intimate streets and cobbled roadways, dates back for over 600 years. But it is far from being a museum. Gamla Stan has its own atmosphere and is very much alive. Concealed within it are some of the best restaurants that Stockholm possesses. One eats in old cellars deep down in the foundations of the city. The traveller to Sweden will take back a host of impressions when he leaves, for this country has many varied faces. Above all else, he will be sure to carry home memories of the sheer beauty of the Swedish countryside, pictures of lake and forest, river and island, memories too of tranquility and peace, of space and freedom, for it is these qualities, so rare in the modern world, that this country, Sweden, has perfectly preserved.